Yeah, those 14 people have been holding it down. I'm very grateful for all that they have been doing through these past couple years. And you could feel that, right? That space where we get to access, where we get to step into, where we can live the truth. So I'm going to invite Momo Cortez to come on up here. She's going to sing a song for us. And I'm going to invite you to really just stay in this open-hearted space. Who are you called to be?
I am called to be a healer of all humanity. I am called to be a dreamer, believe in what can be. I am called to make a maker, be an instrument of peace. I am called to be a giver, of abundance I receive. I am called to be a prayer, living out the truth I seek. I am called to be everything. I am called to be.
Should we announce it at the end?
Called to be the glory on earth so all might see all the love and all the beauty that shines in you and me. I am the living, breathing God, and you are one in me. We are called to be. You are called to be a mother, to nurture family. You are called to be a brother, be strength in times of need. You are called to be a neighbor, see a friend in all you meet. You are called to be a leader, to build community. You are called to be a prayer, living out the truth you seek. You are called to be everything. You are called to be. Called to be the glory here on earth, so all might see all the love and all the beauty that shines in you and me. I am the living, breathing God, and you are one in me. We are called to be. We are called to be the kindness, set the broken-hearted free. We are called to be forgiveness, where pain has run too deep. We are called to be compassion, be the wind beneath each wing. We are called to make communion, only then can we succeed. We are called to be a prayer, living out the truth we seek. We are called to be everything. We are called to be. God, you are one in me. We are called to be. We are called to be. We are called to be.
Momo Cortez, everybody. We can all identify with that, right? That sense within us that's called to be, that feeling within us that we know that is rooted in the truth of who we are. We spend time together like this. We spend time in meditation. We spend time in prayer, and we feel so centered, right? We feel so anchored and grounded. And I don't know about you, but for me, that place of being centered and grounded is literally like a thought away from being something else completely. And that moment happens in an absolute heartbeat. In a heartbeat, I can go from being this centered, joyful, uplifted, anchored individual who understands my personal divinity, right? I look like that. I am just joyous. And in a heartbeat, I can become that. Can anybody relate? And we are our own obstacle to understanding how we are called to live the truth. What gets in the way of us living the truth is our own stuff. And we find ourselves in those moments where we shift away, we find ourselves in enemy territory. We literally think that the world is against us. We think that someone is against us. We think that the situation, or even sometimes we think that our past is against us. I've been having some hip stuff, right? And I broke my back when I was 26. And so there's a part of me that wants to fall into the story of, well, if I hadn't broken my back when I was 26, I wouldn't be experiencing the pain that I'm experiencing now. My past is against me in that moment. There is nothing actually against you, because there is only one. There is only one power, one presence, one life. Everything is actually working for us. Oh. So we know we're in enemy territory when we start to have uncomfortable feelings. You guys know what those are like, right? We might start to feel anxious. We might start to feel tense. We might start to be angry. We have these uncomfortable feelings, and they start to cascade on us. Sometimes we're also having unpleasant sensations. So for me, I feel it in my belly all the time. If things aren't quite like aligned, I get this thing in my stomach. I'll actually say to my wife, I'll say, honey, I got that thing in my stomach. And she's like, all right, well, let's go through your day and figure out what it is, right? What is that unpleasant sensation? Maybe your palms get sweaty. Maybe you feel yourself getting like breathless. Maybe you feel it in your voice. Maybe all of a sudden you have problems finding your voice, right? And then the troublesome thoughts. And you guys, all the thoughts. I should have, I could have, why didn't I? Why didn't they? That's the big one. If only they had, I wouldn't be in this situation. If I ruled the world, there would be no discord anywhere on this planet, right? That's the sense that we come from. So our greatest source of suffering is believing that we are separate from God. That is our greatest source of suffering. Anytime you are in enemy territory, it is because you think you are separate from God. Some part of you believes that there's an us and a them. Some part of you is buying into the story that you are not the actual living presence of the one. We even scream at technology, right? How many people in here have screamed at the phone because it's not doing what we want it to do? It's an inanimate object, and yet we are reduced to it somehow being against us. And it can really happen like that fast. And what is actually happening when that triggers is that there are places within us. There's our wounds, there's our sense of unworthiness, there's our sense of not enoughness, there's our sense of loss, of grief. We have these wounds that we're carrying around with us. And we navigate them to the best of our ability, right? That's what we're doing. We're navigating them to the best of our ability. But when one of those wounds gets touched, it's like a live wire. It gets touched and everything within you sort of reacts and responds. Doesn't respond, just reacts, right? Just pure reactivity. And we have all developed strategies and coping mechanisms for navigating this place of being uncomfortable, this place where we feel separate. We have all developed ways that we cope with that. And I like to think of it as we don't walk around as sort of an open bleeding wound, at least most of us don't, right? We have figured out ways to contain and to take our wound and to sort of close it down and make it kind of neat and make it kind of pretty. Debbie Ford, in her book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, talks about how we create almost an electrical outlet, the equivalent of an electrical outlet. And it's fairly safe, it's fairly protected, except when that perfect situation comes along that just plugs right in to the hurt, to the wound, to the not enoughness, to the place that feels separate from the one. And when that happens, our entire system gets hijacked. And it is in a nanosecond. The endorphins kick in, the amygdala goes crazy. It's like our whole system. So even if one of your coping mechanisms, I caught myself doing this morning. Chris and I were driving over the bridge, and here it comes. This crazy driver cut in front of us and was like swerving all over the place. And I could feel my reactivity, but strategies and coping mechanisms. And all I did was take my hand and go like that. And my wife went, "I know." And I said, "Right?" And then she looked at me and she said, "I was fine until you brought it up." I was handling it just fine, and I was laughing, because that's what happens, right? Whatever it is that gets triggered, we start creating all of this story. All of this story. So we start blaming other people. If they had done it this way, then I wouldn't be in this situation. We are angry at people. What is wrong with them? I cannot believe that car is driving like that on the road. We have judgment. What an idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. We can withdraw. And this is one to watch for, right? When we feel as if we need to protect that. And it's interesting. What we're protecting is the place that feels separate. Like, let me be really clear. What we're trying to protect is the part of us that feels separate. It's not real that we're separate, but we're trying to protect it. And so we will withdraw. We will remove ourselves. Oh, no. That's not in my world. That is not happening in my world. There's only one world. Of course it's happening in your world. But we pretend that we can somehow keep the separation alive. We are purposefully trying to maintain the separation because we have this vested interest in the idea that somehow it's all justified. That somehow the wound that we have, the story that we have, that it's all justified. My favorite one is efforting. That's my big strategy. If I just send one more email, just one more, laying out really clearly what an idiot this person is being, and that if they would just do what I am trying to tell them to do, everything will be okay. So we have these ways of actually coping with the fact that we feel separate and we don't feel like the one. But all they do is perpetuate the story that we are separate and that we are not the one. Can you feel how it becomes a perpetuating cycle? And so we end up living from who we're not rather than living from who we are. All the choices that we're making are about who we aren't in the world because we're trying to protect ourselves so deeply that we are not actually showing up as who we are called to be. And those places of reactivity are really beautiful guideposts. They allow us to see what's within us that is seeking to be healed. They allow us to understand where in our understanding of ourself are we not living the truth. Where in our own understanding of ourself are we attached to the idea that we are outside of God. And our wounds, untended, actually will blind us from our own true nature. Now, I'm not saying we don't get wounded. We experience life. We have wounds. But we need to bring them into the wholeness that we are. We need to be awake and aware enough to acknowledge where we have separated ourselves from the divine. Because living from truth, living as truth, living the truth means that we are able to show up in a way that is so free and so full and so loving and is about service and is about compassion and is about light and love. But when we're so focused on trying to pretend that we're something that we aren't, or are we, we're so caught up in that we can't actually radiate and be the radiant love that is our true nature and our true name. So Jung calls those parts of ourselves that we want to disown the shadow, right? And there's lots of definitions for shadow. We're going to stick with just the clear one, that they're the parts of yourself that you want to disown. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad, as Ken and I were discussing. The parts of ourselves that we want to disown aren't bad. We've just decided that they are. If you grew up in a family of artists and everyone is super creative, then perhaps you were told that being logical and rational and knowing how to work an Excel spreadsheet is wrong and somehow less than. The opposite could be true. If you grew up with a family of lawyers, if you grew up in an environment where everybody is like very, very rigid and you are a creative, artistic person, then what happens in that moment is you think that creativity is somehow something that's wrong. So you decide that through culture, through experience. But it's not true. We contain infinite. We contain multitudes. So everything that we are is always available to us. But if we are uncomfortable with it, then we spend all of our time trying to hide it, right? So Debbie Ford uses the analogy again of beach balls. All the things we don't want to be, that they're like, we're trying to keep them under the water so that nobody can see them. And we're pushing them down, and we're pushing them down. And how many beach balls do you have? And you're trying to keep all those beach balls down. Can you feel how exhausting that is? And then what happens, we all know when you're in the water and you're pushing a beach ball down, what happens eventually if it slips? Poof! It just pops up in your face, right? Anybody ever experienced that? You go from 0 to 60 in like a heartbeat, right? That's the beach ball. Poof. Because the thing is, we think we're hiding all of these things from the world. But guess what? The water's clear. Everybody can see them. Everybody else can see you, except you. The shadow is the part of yourself you don't want to see. So no matter how many times I try to turn to catch my shadow, it is always just out of reach. But how I can see those parts of myself is by how it shows up in community, how it shows up right here. Because the things that I'm so uncomfortable with, what I do with them is I project them out into the world. So I went through a period of time where I was uncomfortable with my bossiness. I'm not anymore. I'm very comfortable with my bossiness now. But I went through a period of time where I was very uncomfortable with my bossiness. And so because I didn't want to own my bossiness, what do you think I was experiencing in the world? Bossy, 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 bossy everywhere. That was all I was experiencing, was bossiness. Because I couldn't own that part of myself. I was pushing it away from myself. And the only place I could see it was how it was showing up in others. Can you feel what a gift that is, though? That we get to be the mirror for each other? That's part of what we do for each other? That we can actually be the place where each of us gets to see the part of ourselves that is so desperate to come home. Yeah. The parts of us that feel outside and separate and alone. They are so desperate to be brought back into the wholeness that is our true nature. And you know, on the other side of my bossiness, when I actually began to embrace my bossiness, what I discovered on the other side of it was that it was also my leadership capacity. It was my vision. It was my ability to persuade. It was my ability to move a project forward. There were so many other things that were available to me because I finally stopped trying to pretend something that I wasn't that. Guess what? Everybody in here is capable of being bossy. Everybody in here. Whatever it is that you think you're not, that only someone else is, guess what? It's you as well. So, I love this quote, right? So take a look at this cartoon. We see things not as they are, but as we are. Right? No matter what we're doing, Our understanding of ourselves is impacting, influencing, obscuring what is actually there. And when we are so focused on understanding what we are not, so you could also say we see things not as they are, but as we are not too, right? If all of our focus is on what we're not being, then that is what's in our way. But if we can focus on the truth of who we are, that first principle, there is only one power and one presence, and I am it, first and second principle, right? If we can come back to that, then where we're seeing from is from an entirely different perspective. And that is how we live the truth. And when we're living the truth, so that's what we're living, right? Not the craziness, not the idea of peace and harmony, but the reality of the beingness of your divine nature. Not the superficial surface of it, but the very truth at the core of who we actually are. So Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So all of those things that are operating as your life that you do not want to look at because they're too uncomfortable, they are actually directing your life, and you believe that they are who you are. How many times has anybody in this room said, oh, I've always been like that? That's just part of who I am. I can't do X, Y, or Z. That is the unconscious ruling your life, and you acquiescing your spiritual authority and saying yes to that. So how do we move through this? So all of this is about reactivity, really is like the alarm bell. When you feel yourself being reactive, that's when you know that you are in enemy territory. And the minute you're in enemy territory, you are no longer aligned and living the truth. You are no longer understanding your wholeness and the world's wholeness, and all that there is one. So the reactiveness that you have is a beautiful, beautiful gift, because it allows us to be able to see that there's something there that is seeking to be healed. And the reactivity, a lot of us got really good at, like, the reactivity happens and we just quiet it down. But we still got reactive, didn't we? We just know how to cope with it. The goal is to heal so that we're not reactive, we are being responsive. So there is a difference between my frustration with the DoorDash delivering, Chinese food instead of Mexican food, and taking 2 hours for me to actually get my Mexican food, right? There's a difference between me being like, I can't believe this is happening, and me calling and being responsive and saying, hey, there's a mistake and you need to fix this, and I'm sorry, you really do need to fix it. And yes, 2 hours is unacceptable, so I would like a refund on my order because this is not acceptable. That is being responsive. But what I was caught up in when that happened was not responsiveness, but reactivity. So what does it mean to live the truth? It means that we're invited to become awake and aware. We have to notice these things. We have to learn to pay attention to our own reactivity, to pay attention to the things that annoy us. The best, every time somebody annoys you and irritates you in the outside world, it is a way to understand and know yourself more. We want to be honest and authentic. And that honesty piece is really important. Being honest enough to say, yep, I can be bossy. Yep, I have a story going on in my heart that I'm not good enough. Yep, I have this thing that's alive in me that if I don't feel like I'm being listened to, I get very, very, very sad and angry. The voicemails, they drive me nuts. I can see my reactivity. They're like, press 1 if you would like. Agent, please. Press 1 if you would like. Agent, please. Press 1 if you would like. Agent! Press 1. Agent! Right? And it's about not being listened to. That's what gets triggered for me in that. And then, so you want to be willing to be honest about that. That like, that's a trigger. That's a thing for me. That's something I'm working on healing. That's something I'm working on being available to and noticing when it's arising. And we want to be compassionate. Because here's the thing, if there's all these things that we're trying to keep down and hidden, and I don't want to be that, and oh, please, I don't want to know who that is, then we're actually not able to be very compassionate with ourselves, are we? And if we're not able to be compassionate with ourselves, then guess what? I can't be compassionate for others. My capacity to be compassionate for others in the world is defined by my capacity to be compassionate with myself. So to be living the truth means that I am practicing compassion, even when somebody is irritating me to no end. That's a sign that I somehow have separated myself and them from the truth of who we both are. And then the last piece is that we need to be committed to it. It's a practice. I've been doing this a long time, and those voice messages still get me, right? They still get me. And that's okay, because I'm able to notice, and every time it's a little bit less. Every time my reactivity is more and more diminished. Every time I'm able to be responsive, more and more responsive rather than reactive. I am on a healing journey for that aspect of myself that somehow thinks that I am not worthy of being heard or listened to. This is some of the most powerful work you can do to live the truth. It means that you constantly come up against the false idea of who you think you are, again and again and again. And you are actually invited to anchor yourself in who you have come here to be. Not who you haven't come here to be, but who have you come here to be. So I'd like everyone to just close your eyes for a second. And just take a minute and think about something that is alive in your life right now. Whatever it is. Whatever you're saying no to about yourself. Whatever it is you think you shouldn't be or can't be or oughtn't be. And then I want you to think about letting that go. Really, let it go. And instead of focusing on that, who have you come here to be? I have come here to be light and love and joy and beauty and leadership and vision. Who have you come here to be? And just call out whatever might be coming up for you. Nurturing. Compassion. Kind, courageous. Fulfilled. Sure, we can come here to be fulfilled. Love. Peace. Brave. Say that again. Happy. Yeah, right? Come here to be happy. Feel that. And remember, there's only one. So all the things that people are saying, guess what? They're yours too. So just feel the surety of that. That this is who I have come here to be. And so pick one, and I want everybody to say, I have come here to be, and then you're going to fill in the blank. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I have come here to be. Wow, now do another one. I have come here to be. One more time. I have come here to be. Yeah, joy. Do you believe it?
I believe the first one.
Right? So this is that part about being honest and authentic. Does it really feel honest? Does it feel really true? Yeah. And if it doesn't feel really true, then that's also a beautiful gift to know that there is work there Because the truth of who you are is joy, is light, is love. And our purpose is to live that truth every moment with each other so that we can show up as compassion, as love for ourselves and for the world.